Demon's Souls is my very first From Software game that I actually finished. It is a solid and a polished starting point that highlights exactly where the later game found their footing. If you played Dark Souls before, and you decide to rate Demon's Souls, you start to see how tiny design choices that From Software made in Dark Souls made a massive difference that turned Dark Souls into the masterpiece that it is. I know this is supposed to be a Demon's Souls review, not me larping about how much a masterpiece Dark Souls is, but I really want to take this angle because I consider this game to be the primordial soup that allowed Dark Souls to sort to become the masterpiece that it is. Here's the kicker, the game is actually really fun, with a unique atmosphere. It has the original DNA that makes Souls-like games so addictive to play, but in all the questionabilization that the game has, you can still feel that core loop that made Souls games so special. For me, one of the greatest mechanics in Dark Souls is SS Blast. It is a healing item that refills every time you rest at a bonfire. And here's the most important thing about it. You only have a limited charge every time you reach a bonfire. Simple limit is absolutely massive for the gameplay experience. The fact that it's limited means that you can spend more time learning the enemy placement and looking at the environment rather than micromanaging your consumables. You're not heading out the boss room stressed about the fact that you might have enough consumables to beat the boss. In Demon's Souls, on the other hand, instead of that, for healing you have something called Moongrass. These are consumable healing items dropped by enemies. For me, this absolutely kills any sort of tension or strategy in the mob fights, instead of that strategic feeling you get fighting mobs in Dark Souls, in which you want to avoid getting hit so you can get as many SS charges as possible when you're fighting the boss, because unless you're an iframe god, dodging arrows, swords, and bombs like it's nothing, you're gonna need those heals, which forces you to reform trash mobs or buy them for NPCs to get more consumables. This unlimited problem also applies to magic, unlike in Dark Souls 1 or 2, in which magic is limited by charges. In Demon's Souls, if you have enough spices, it's basically unlimited. Magic is the strongest it'll ever be in a From Software game. Being a mage in this game is like bringing a hydrogen bomb to a knife fight. It makes most bosses look like a joke. Instead of fighting the boss, what I'm really fighting here is my hell and my regen. I need both of them at the right amounts of the permission to blast off the boss. Another major point of annoyance is with the world tendency system. How it works is that each of the 5 worlds has its own heater meter that shifts based on your action. If you kill a boss, the world shifts toward white, but if you die while in body form, the world shifts toward black. As it gets darker, enemies will get more health, they'll hit harder, and special Black Phantom's version of enemies start spawning in. To make it worse, dying in body form cuts your maximum health in half once you return to soul form. The only way to mitigate this is by using the Cling Ring, an item that restores a portion of that missing bar. I mean, given how the mechanic works, this ring isn't really an option, it's a tax. It creates a bizarre incentive for the most optimal way to play is stay dead and be in soul form. Contrasted to Dark Souls, staying human gives you the ability to summon and help kill bonfires, or SS Blast could have more healing charges. There's an actual incentive to be human, and because I played the PS3 version without a server, there's almost zero reason to do it other than to get upgrade materials to farm more souls. But despite all the criticism I just throw at it, there is still something I deeply appreciate about the game. The game is incredibly brave, especially if you look at the context of when it was made. You have to remember that 2009 was the era of the prestige cinematic experience. Uncharted 2 just set the gold standard for AAA gaming. Those handheld journeys where the spectacle was the priority. Everybody and their mom basically wanted to be Uncharted 2. The industry was obsessed with games being accessible, terrified that player might get lost or God forbid actually fail. And then Demon's Souls shows up, no fucks given, which felt like a blatant middle finger to the industry's trend. It's a game that draws a player to a degree that it felt almost revolutionary in 2009, proving that there was still a massive audience for a game that respects your intelligence enough to let you fail. So where does it leave Demon's Souls for me? For me, it's a prototype that had to be broken so that a masterpiece could be built. If you go into this expecting the polished interconnected perfection of Dark Souls 1's first half, you're going to be disappointed by the grass farming and the world tendency nonsense. But if you look at it for what it is, a raw, unfiltered experiment that dared to be difficult in an era of hand-holding, it's almost impossible not to respect it. Demon's Souls isn't the best game in the series. Granted, I've only played 3 up until Dark Souls 2, but it is the most important. It's the thing that started it all, and even with all its flaws, it's still a soul that most modern game doesn't seem to have.